Have you ever wondered why Japanese schools seem like they're from the future while ours are stuck in the past? Today we're diving into 12 absolutely mind-blowing things hidden in Japanese schools that seriously need to exist everywhere else. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll be wondering why your school never had any of this stuff. And hey, if you're already mad that your school doesn't have these things, go ahead and smash that subscribe button so you don't miss out on more eye-opening content like this. All right, let's start with something that sounds completely bizarre but makes total sense when you think about it. In Japanese schools, students are the ones who clean the classrooms. Yeah, you heard that right. No janitors coming in after school to pick up your mess. The students themselves sweep the floors, wipe down the desks, clean the bathrooms, and even scrub the hallways. Before you start thinking this sounds like child labor, hear me out. This system teaches kids responsibility from a young age. When you're the one who has to clean up the mess, you think twice before trashing the place. It creates this sense of ownership and respect for shared spaces that honestly we could all use more of. Imagine if every student had to take turns cleaning their classroom. I guarantee you'd see a lot less gum stuck under desks and a lot more care taken with school property. Plus, it builds character and teaches practical life skills. You can't just coast through school without learning how to maintain your environment. Next up, let's talk about school lunch. And no, I'm not talking about whatever mystery meat is being served in your cafeteria right now. In Japan, school lunches are taken seriously as an educational experience. Students don't just grab their food and scatter to different corners of the school. They eat together in their classroom, family style, and here's the kicker, they serve each other. Designated students wear little chef uniforms, dish out the portions, and everyone eats the same meal together. The lunch menu is carefully planned by nutritionists to be balanced and healthy, often featuring local ingredients and traditional dishes. Lunchtime becomes this communal experience where kids learn about nutrition, practice gratitude for their food, and develop social bonds. But I'd compare that to the chaos of a typical school cafeteria, where kids are inhaling chicken nuggets while playing on their phones. The Japanese approach turns eating into a moment of mindfulness and community building. Schools everywhere should absolutely adopt this because it's not just about feeding kids, it's about teaching them how to have a healthy relationship with food and with each other. Here's something that'll blow your mind. Japanese schools have a shoe-changing system that actually makes a ton of sense. When students arrive at school, they swap their outdoor shoes for indoor shoes called uwabaki. These are typically soft slippers or sneakers that are only worn inside the school building. There are special lockers right at the entrance just for storing your outdoor shoes. Now you might be thinking, why on earth would you need to change shoes at school? Well, think about all the dirt, germs, and who knows what else you track in from outside. By having everyone change into clean indoor shoes, the school stays way cleaner, which means less maintenance and a healthier environment overall. It also creates this psychological shift where you're transitioning from the outside world into the learning environment. It's like a little ritual that puts you in the right mindset for school. Plus, it makes the floors clean enough that students can actually sit on them comfortably during activities. If schools adopted this everywhere, we'd have cleaner buildings, fewer germs spreading around, and maybe kids would actually feel more at home in their learning space. But let's move on to something that might sound strict, but actually creates a really positive environment. Japanese schools have a uniform policy that goes beyond just wearing the same clothes. Students are generally expected to maintain a neat appearance without flashy accessories, extreme hairstyles, or heavy makeup. Now, before you start screaming about freedom of expression, consider this. When everyone's dressed similarly, there's less pressure to keep up with fashion trends and less bullying based on what you're wearing. Kids from families with less money aren't immediately singled out because everyone's in the same boat. It levels the playing field and lets students focus on what actually matters, learning and building relationships based on personality rather than appearance. The uniform becomes part of school identity and pride. Students take care of their uniforms and wear them with a sense of belonging. Obviously, there's a balance to be struck between uniformity and allowing personal expression, but the core idea of reducing social pressure and economic inequality through dress codes is something worth considering seriously. Now, here's something really unique that speaks to how Japanese schools view education holistically. They have what's called moral education classes where students learn about ethics, empathy, and being good members of society. These aren't religious classes or anything preachy. They're structured lessons where kids discuss real-life scenarios, learn about respecting others, understanding different perspectives, and contributing positively to their communities. They might read stories and discuss the moral implications, role play difficult social situations, or talk about current events through an ethical lens. The goal is to develop well-rounded human beings, not just academically smart test takers. In a world where cyberbullying, polarization, and lack of empathy seem to be growing problems, having dedicated time to teach kids how to be decent people seems pretty important. Schools everywhere are so focused on math and reading scores that they forget to teach students how to actually navigate the world as thoughtful, caring individuals. Adding moral education to curriculums could help create a generation that's not just smart, but also kind and socially responsible. Here's something practical that would save so much drama. Japanese schools minimize the whole clique and popularity contest thing by rotating classroom assignments every year. That's right. Classes are shuffled annually, so you're constantly meeting new people and working with different groups. This prevents those rigid social hierarchies from forming where you're stuck in the same friend group or the same outcast position for your entire school career. It forces students to develop social flexibility and learn how to get along with all different types of people, not just their chosen crew. Think about how valuable that skill is in real life. You don't get to choose your coworkers or neighbors, so learning early how to build relationships with diverse personalities is incredibly useful. It also means that if you're having issues with certain classmates, you know it's not forever. There's always a fresh start coming. This system reduces bullying, broadens social circles, and creates a more cohesive school community overall. Implementing this in schools everywhere would help break down those toxic social dynamics that make school miserable for so many kids. Let's talk about something that might seem small but has a huge impact. Japanese schools have a culture of bowing and formal greetings. Students bow to teachers when entering classrooms, they greet each other properly, and there's an overall emphasis on polite interaction. This isn't about being submissive or overly formal, it's about showing respect and acknowledgement. When you bow to someone, you're taking a moment to recognize their presence and show that you value them. In schools where kids barely make eye contact and grunt at each other in the hallways, imagine if there was an expectation of actually greeting people respectfully. It would create a completely different atmosphere. Respectful greetings set the tone for respectful interactions throughout the day. Teachers feel valued, students feel seen, and everyone operates with a baseline of courtesy. You could adapt this for different cultures without necessarily adopting bowing, but the core principle of teaching kids to greet each other and their teachers with genuine respect would transform school culture. It's about building a community where people actually acknowledge and appreciate each other, instead of just coexisting in the same building. Here's something that tackles a major problem we see in schools today. Japanese schools generally have very strict policies about phone usage, with many schools banning smartphones entirely, or requiring them to be turned off and stored away during school hours. In an age where kids are glued to their screens and attention spans are plummeting, this seems like a no-brainer. Without phones constantly buzzing and demanding attention, students can actually focus on lessons, engage in face-to-face conversations, and be present in the moment. Lunchtime becomes about talking to your classmates instead of scrolling through social media. Class time is for learning, not secretly texting under your desk. Teachers don't have to compete with TikTok for student attention. Sure, phones can be educational tools when used properly, but let's be honest, most of the time they're just distractions. Having clear boundaries about when and where phones are allowed teaches kids self-control and helps them develop the ability to focus deeply on tasks. But schools that implement strict phone policies report better academic performance, improved social interaction, and fewer issues with cyberbullying. This is definitely something that needs to spread globally because our kids are drowning in digital distractions. Now let's talk about something that gets students actually moving and engaged. Japanese schools have incredibly robust club activities that are considered a central part of the school experience, not just optional extras. After regular classes end, students participate in clubs ranging from sports teams to cultural activities like calligraphy, tea ceremony, music, drama, and tons more. These clubs are taken seriously with dedicated time, resources, and often competitive elements. But being part of a club gives students a sense of identity and belonging beyond just their academic performance. It allows kids to discover passions, develop skills, and bond with others who share their interests. The emphasis on clubs means that success at school isn't just measured by test scores. You can be the star of the kendo club or the president of the gardening club, and that's just as valued. This creates multiple pathways for students to feel accomplished and important. Too many schools treat extracurriculars as afterthoughts or cut them entirely due to budget issues, but Japanese schools recognize that these activities are essential for developing well-rounded, happy students. Every school should invest in robust extracurricular programs because that's often where the real learning and personal growth happens. Now, here's something that shows a completely different approach to mistakes and failure. In Japanese schools, there's much less emphasis on constantly praising kids and more focus on persistence and improvement. When a student struggles with something, the approach isn't to lower the bar or tell them they're special just for trying. Instead, there's an expectation that with effort and practice, they can improve. Mistakes are seen as natural parts of learning, not disasters to be avoided. This creates what's called a growth mindset, where students believe their abilities can be developed rather than being fixed traits. Compare this to schools where kids are constantly told they're amazing and get participation trophies for everything. Then those kids often develop fragile egos and give up easily when things get hard because they've never learned to push through difficulty. Japanese students learn that struggle is normal and that real satisfaction comes from overcoming challenges through hard work. This doesn't mean being harsh or unsupportive. It means having high expectations and providing the structure and encouragement for students to meet them. Schools everywhere need to strike a better balance between supporting students and challenging them to actually grow. Let's talk about something super practical that teaches real responsibility. In many Japanese schools, students take turns serving as class monitors or representatives with actual duties and authority. These aren't just ceremonial positions where you get a badge and do nothing. Had student monitors help organize activities, mediate disputes, communicate between students and teachers, and take on genuine leadership responsibilities. This gives kids practical experience in leadership and problem solving. They learn what it's like to be accountable for a group, to make decisions that affect others, and to handle the social dynamics of being in charge. These are skills that will serve them throughout their lives in ways that memorizing historical dates never will. Too often, schools just tell kids about leadership in abstract terms without giving them real opportunities to practice it. By rotating leadership positions and giving students meaningful responsibilities, Japanese schools create experiences where kids can actually develop those competencies. At every school should create structured opportunities for students to lead in concrete ways, not just pick a class president once a year and forget about it. Finally, let's talk about something that might seem small but represents a completely different philosophy about education. Japanese schools emphasize starting the day together with morning meetings where the whole class gathers, shares announcements, and sets intentions for the day. It's not just roll call and administrative stuff. It's a moment of collective focus where everyone transitions into learning mode together. Students might share what they're looking forward to, discuss a topic relevant to everyone, or simply acknowledge each other's presence. This creates cohesion and reminds everyone that they're part of a community with shared goals. In contrast, many schools have students trickling in whenever, slumping into their seats and waiting for someone to tell them what to do. There's no sense of collective purpose or group energy. Starting each day with an intentional gathering would help students feel more connected to their classmates and more invested in the shared experience of learning. It's a simple practice that requires minimal time but could significantly improve school culture by emphasizing that we're all in this together rather than just individuals forced to occupy the same space. So there you have it. 12 incredible things hiding in Japanese schools that seriously need to exist everywhere else. From students cleaning their own classrooms to structured morning meetings that build community, these practices show a completely different approach to education. It's one that sees school as a place to develop the whole person, not just fill heads with facts. Imagine if your school had even half of these things. You'd probably actually want to be there. If this video opened your eyes to what school could be like, make sure you're subscribed because we're always exploring ideas that challenge how we think about the world. Drop a comment and let me know which of these things you wish your school had, or if you think any of them wouldn't work outside Japan. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. And you know what's really interesting about all of this? These aren't just random quirks or traditions that Japanese schools follow for no reason. They're part of a deeply interconnected system that has been refined over decades, and all built on some core principles that we've kind of lost sight of in a lot of Western education. The philosophy behind these practices is that school isn't just about academics. It's about shaping character, building community, and preparing students to be thoughtful, responsible members of society. That's a radical concept compared to how many schools operate today, where everything is measured by standardized test scores and college acceptance rates. Think about how all these elements work together. The shoe-changing system keeps the school clean, which creates a healthier environment. Students cleaning their classrooms teaches responsibility. Eating lunch together builds community and social skills. Uniforms reduce inequality. Moral education classes develop empathy. Rotating classrooms help students learn to work with everyone. Phone restrictions keep them present and focused. Club activities give them outlets for passion and creativity. A growth mindset teaches them resilience. Student leadership positions give them real responsibility. And morning meetings tie it all together by creating intentional connection at the start of each day. These aren't isolated practices, they're all interconnected pieces of a much larger educational philosophy. What's also fascinating is that many of these practices have real scientific backing. Research has shown that cleaner environments improve concentration and reduce illness. Eating meals together strengthens social bonds and improves mental health. Physical activity through clubs and exercise reduces anxiety and depression. Learning that mistakes are part of growth creates more successful learners. A social connection and a sense of belonging are actually some of the most important factors in student well-being and academic success. Yet somehow, despite all this research, many schools are moving in the opposite direction, cutting social programs, increasing screen time, emphasizing competition over collaboration, and making school more stressful, not less. The thing is, we can't just copy and paste Japanese school practices into a completely different cultural context and expect them to work exactly the same way. Every culture has different values, different family structures, different economic realities, and different educational traditions. What works perfectly in Tokyo might need significant adaptation to work in Toronto, or Texas, or Tokyo, Ohio. But that doesn't mean there isn't tons we can learn and adapt from these practices. So the core principles underlying these systems, the values of community, responsibility, character development, and seeing education as being about the whole person, those are universally valuable. It's about finding ways to implement these principles in ways that make sense for your particular school community and cultural context. Some of these practices are actually easier to implement than you might think. A phone policy doesn't require any special budget or cultural shift beyond collective agreement that focus matters. Morning meetings could start tomorrow. Rotating classroom assignments could happen next semester. Moral education doesn't need to be religious or preachy. It can be integrated into existing subjects or added as a new class. Student leadership positions could be structured differently to give kids real responsibilities. Then schools could emphasize growth mindset in their approach to grading and feedback. Some of these changes are harder, like completely revamping what school lunch looks like or getting parents on board with a uniform system. But even those aren't impossible if there's genuine commitment to change. What would probably be the biggest shift would be changing the fundamental mindset about what school is for. Right now, so much of the Western education system is focused on sorting and ranking students, on competition, on preparing them to be productive workers in a capitalist economy. It's very utilitarian. Japanese schools certainly care about academic achievement, but they also see education as fundamentally about developing human beings who can think critically, work well with others, contribute meaningfully to society, and live fulfilling lives. Those are different priorities, and they lead to completely different school systems. It's not that one approach is automatically better than the other, but it's worth asking which one creates happier, healthier, more capable young adults. And I think most people would agree that the Japanese approach produces young people who are more socially competent, more resilient, more engaged, and ultimately more prepared for actual real life. Here's something else worth considering. The adults who experienced these Japanese school practices don't seem to resent them or feel like they were restricted or harmed. If anything, many of them look back fondly on their school experience and credit it with teaching them important values and skills. That's worth something. Now, when you talk to people who went to schools with student leadership, community service, regular physical activity, and strong social connections, they tend to speak positively about their education. They feel like school mattered, not just because of what they learned in textbooks, but because of what they learned about themselves and others. That's a pretty powerful outcome that we should be chasing. The reality is that no education system is perfect, and Japan's schools certainly have their own challenges and criticisms. But the fact that they've prioritized certain values and structured their schools to reflect those values has clearly had positive effects. Students come out of Japanese schools with different skill sets and mindsets than students from many Western schools. They're more likely to be collaborative, but more comfortable with responsibility, more resilient in the face of challenges, and more oriented toward community well-being rather than pure individual advancement. Those are outcomes we should want for our students too. So, what does this all mean for you? Well, if you're a student, you can start implementing some of these principles in your own life right now. You don't need your whole school to change for you to develop a growth mindset, to seek out communities and clubs that matter to you, to practice being respectful in your interactions, or to think about how you can contribute to your school community. You can be the change you want to see. If you're a parent, you can advocate for some of these practices in your child's school. You can push for better extracurricular programs, ask questions about how moral education is addressed, can support phone restrictions, or suggest community service opportunities. If you're a teacher, you can implement some of these ideas in your classroom right now. You can teach with a growth mindset, give your students real responsibilities, create moments of community connection, and help your students see themselves as part of something larger than just their own academic success. Education is something that affects literally everyone, so it matters to keep thinking about how we can make it better. It matters to look at what works in other places and thoughtfully consider how we might adapt those ideas. It matters to remember that school is about more than test scores and college admissions, even though those things get focused on heavily. It matters to create environments where kids actually want to learn, but where they feel safe and connected, where they're challenged to grow, where they learn real skills they'll use in life, and where they develop into kind, thoughtful, capable people. Thanks so much for watching this video all the way through. I really appreciate it. If you found this interesting or thought-provoking, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on more videos exploring ideas about education, society, culture, and how we can all do things better. And seriously, drop a comment below and tell me what you think. Would any of these Japanese school practices actually work in your school? What do you think American schools are doing right that maybe other countries could learn from? What's one thing you wish you could change about your school experience? I love reading your comments, and they genuinely help me figure out what topics to explore next. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.